Hello, everyone. Good evening, afternoon, morning. Let's see, Sandy. Hi, Sandy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Awesome. So we can begin actually, since you have to hop up earlier today. So
Okay.
I'm gonna do. So hello, everyone, and it's been a while I did a live, so I just wanted to come up here and do one today with Sandy. Sandy's in the house today, and she was my professional editor for my book, Pray This. It's somewhere around here. The book is somewhere around here. But yeah, and we wanted to just talk about all things professional editing. This video is going to be available on YouTube as well. So you guys can watch it at your convenience. But I want Sandy to introduce herself. So Sandy, take it away.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited. This is actually my first live, so yeah, and as I told Noella before, I kind of took a little bit of a social media break, and she talks about that in her book, which I think is really important. As I was transitioning careers. So my name is Sandy. I'm a proofreader and editor. I started off as a proofreader first, and then I started to see the need for editing. Also, the fact that a lot of people misunderstood what proofreading meant, and they thought that that meant like an editor. And then so I started to learn how to edit, taking some classes, and yeah. So my background is in music teaching. I love to sing opera and things like that. So yeah, so that's where I come from. So I kind of, what ties everything together is I connect with people like a teacher. You know, I'm not a writing coach or a book coach or anything like that. But a lot of my clients are first-time authors, so I like to guide and help just with the process, just what I know. And then if I don't know something, I'll refer you to someone who does. But yeah, I've had Proofreader Sandy for just over 3 years now, and it's been really fun, and I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And we love to have you here today because you are the expert in that field. I don't know anything about proofreading or editing, but you mentioned something. You said proofreading and editing, it's different. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so if you think about the word proofreading, so a proof is something historically that is like the hard copy of what's going to be published. And so it was just someone who was checking it for errors. So it has nothing to do with the actual words. You know what I mean? Like that's already done. Like the person's already decided what's going to be in the book, how it's going to be worded and all that. So the proofreading is just kind of like out the door. Like, it's like, can you please just check this for errors? So you, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like proofreaders marks. Like, have you ever seen those little marks? Like, I don't know, maybe in school, like they kind of teach you, cause I'm 31. So like, I don't know, when I was little, they kind of taught us like, oh, you insert word here, and it's like a little arrow.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
those things. So those are proofreaders marks, like how people did it before computers. So that's all proofreading is, like just letting people know there's little errors with these little symbols. And I think that process, like the non-digital process, is so beautiful, but we don't do that anymore, you know? So actually in the school that I went to become a proofreader, they kind of teach you it, but they're like, well, nowadays we do it digitally, so like let's move on to this, you know. But I remember my dad would use those, and actually my interest in English comes from my dad because he's really obsessed with English, and I'm Colombian American, and so translation and helping people that are English speakers as a second language is also a huge passion of mine. So yeah, that's where that all kind of started, and my interest in that. Yeah, I answered the question, but then I went somewhere else.
No,
but yeah,
I love that because we're still on track. We're still on track. You talked about, I asked about the difference between proofreading and editing, and you did explain proofreading, which I'm very familiar with now that you explained it. That's basically what we do in high school in that little RO, and it's quick. It's not like in depth. So let's go and talk. Let's go ahead and talk about editing. And if you can also share the, I believe 3 to 4 types, because the copy and line editing was together. I was always confused about that. I was like, why isn't it separate? But if you can go ahead and explain the editing and also the different types and the ones that you offer.
So the way I do it is I do 1, 2, 3 steps. So I do the developmental editing, which is a broader, more structural editing. That is before we get into the details. So there's the before we get into the details. Then in the middle, I do copy and line editing together, because there are just so many different ways that so many people do it. And just over time, I realized that my process is to do those together. So the difference between copy and line editing, as I understand it, is copy editing is just making sure that you are following the rules of English, that there's proper punctuation, that tenses match, that the sentence like makes sense and things like that. And then line editing, which some people consider that maybe to be the same as copy editing, but I don't, because line editing to me is more like, I'm actually going to help you make this sentence better, you know, because you can make something make sense, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good, or that it's informed by like what your purpose is. So to me, I see it like a spectrum of like, if you think of like a rainbow, like, so if you have developmental editing on one side, next to it is line editing, which is informed by, okay, what we decided on the structure, who's the audience, you know, all of these things. So I'm going to line edit, make it, improve it to actually make it reach like males between age 35 and 37 that are into video games or whatever it is, you know, that your target audience is. And then after that, I'm going to make sure that it makes sense, because sometimes in the creative process, you're just kind of going off, but that doesn't mean that it's like proper grammar. Right. And also, grammar isn't always the most important thing, right? Because like I said, I work with a lot of people who English is their second language. And so, and I speak Spanish, and I find that the way that someone who speaks another language, when they're writing in English, it actually ends up sounding artistic. You know, it actually ends up sounding kind of cool and unique. So I basically kind of, with line editing and copy editing, I kind of negotiate like, okay, like, obviously I want this person to look good. I want them to look smart and educated, but at the same time, I don't want to take away their like creative,
like strip it away.
Yeah. So to me, those are the 3 different types of editing that I do. Just to recap, developmental editing, then goes into line editing and copy editing. But the way that I package it, like you said, is I do developmental editing first, which is very involved with the author about like how it's going to be marketed, who is it for. It's very broad, but very important, because you want it to reach the right people. And then once we get to the text, I do line editing and copy editing at the same time, which is more of a private process for me, because I've already gained a lot of like information from the author from the first stage that we do. So yeah.
And then the last one is proofreading.
Right. After all of that, I make sure that the author is happy, that, you know, we decided everything. And proofreading for me, yeah, it's just, you know, to most people, the function of it is just to make sure there's no errors. But I also include, like, if you have citations, if I'm working on a Christian book, make sure that your, you know, your scriptures, like we did, that they are, you know, correct, or just as, you know, because also with that, I don't want to stump on anyone's like creative, like their interpretations of scriptures and things like that. You know, like any articles that you did, I actually do that after, because the way I see it is like I'm zoomed out, then I zoom in a little bit, and then the proofreading is when I'm zooming in like a lot, looking at the tiny details. You know, there might be like an extra space or an extra period, or like I might just help the formatting a little bit, just so the formatter, the next person that's looking at it, it's a little easier on them and they understand what your view is. Because the more that we can be organized and communicate and have the file in a good state, in my opinion, like the smoother the process is, because it's just this this field is just so like, there's just so much
like, because I have a timer on my IG, so anytime I've used like up to an hour, it locks me out. But that's why I went out for a bit. Well, hi Heather. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi,
We're
Heather.
talking about professional editing today, and I have Sandi on here who helped me to edit my book, my first book, Pray This. It's on Amazon right now, the ebook, and the paperback is going to be, I believe it's on there as well, so it's available for purchase. But we're talking about why we need, hi Anna, we're talking about why the different steps of editing. And I think my next question for people that are writing anything, let's say they're writing a book or an ebook and they want to showcase it to the world, why is it important to have someone professionally edit your work? Why can't I just use something like the paid version of Grammarly and I'm all set? Why do I need to pay all that money for someone else to edit my work?
Well, I actually just took a course on AI and writing, and it's funny because AI can help us detect some things, but as you can probably guess, or as maybe perhaps many of you have experienced, AI is really funny when it tries to guess or help you out, because it's not human. Maybe one day we'll get there, but you really do need a human, because there's lots of stuff that, for example, even just something that I always had growing up, because I'm 31, right? So I like grew up with like Microsoft Word and like the little guy with the, you know, the paperclip guy in the corner, and like, you know, he would check your grammar and stuff. But like sometimes you have things like in a sentence, you know, when you end up with I had cookies for breakfast, you know, and it's like had, well, that's technically correct. So I mean, you know, I'll leave it in there, right? If I'm doing like copy editing, like that's technically correct, but the computer will think it's wrong just simply because it's repeated words. You know, I don't know if that's the best choice. You know, I have to really look at the whole context, but that's just an example. Like it'll pick up things and think that you're doing something else when you're really like, no, that's not what I meant. You know, it's like, it's being a computer. It's basically has its limitations. And also sometimes as an author, like you just have like a lot of bias, and also you're blind to certain things, because you're like, the way I see it is like, if you're the author and you have decided to write this book, you probably know a lot about this subject, right? And you know, like too much. I always say this. I say this on my YouTube channel. I have a little tiny budding YouTube channel about this, because I felt the need to explain, and I'm like, okay, everybody's asking me the same question, so I'm gonna just put it in a video. So I talk about how the author knows too much, especially with self-help, because like you're trying to teach someone something, and I've experienced this with music teaching, is like sometimes you're just like spewing things and people are like, wait, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? I'm not there yet. What do you mean? I'm all the way over here. Like I haven't even thought about that yet, you know? So in developmental editing, the first stage of editing, I find myself having to kind of flip the book like backwards sometimes because of this. Not every author does this, But it happens a lot because if you're just writing a book, especially if you're of the mind, if you're one of those writers that you don't edit when you write, that's kind of what ends up happening subconsciously. Because if you think about it, like, for example, I've done a couple books about divorce, right? Like how to heal from a divorce. And the person, when they started their journey in real life, you know, they were somewhere vulnerable, they were scared, they were all these things. And then they, at the end, they ended up coming out of that empowered. But sometimes, like, when you lead with the kind of empowered, more wise mindset, and like in the first few chapters, it's like, it's hard for the reader to really relate where you were. You want the reader, your ideal reader is actually someone who just got divorced. So they're in a different place. And so I use like a certain structure behind the book that we don't necessarily have to tell the reader about. We just show them. Like for one book, I used the stages of grief as my structure for the book, because it seemed like all of the themes that the author was using seemed to go with that. But she didn't plan that on purpose. She didn't do that. But I was like, this is the stages, because that's actually kind of the way that the person would be progressing through their healing process while they're reading your book. So yeah. There are many reasons, because, yeah, that human element, and my job is to be like, pretend I'm the reader and be like, okay, what's in it for me? 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 Like every word, every sentence has to be justified. If not, you lose them, especially, as you guys probably know, it's in today's day and age, like people's attention spans are a lot shorter.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I did appreciate that because which is good. Honestly, I do suggest everyone just use Google Docs, because that back and forth with the comments and the suggestion, and you will do that. You'll be like, what does this mean? Maybe I don't understand this. Can you expand? What are you talking about?
Right.
This is repeated. Should we take this out? So that feedback, hearing from you was very helpful, because like you say, authors, sometimes they think they know too much. You're so invested in the book. So sometimes it's good to have someone with an outside perspective come in and just go through the work and really help you see the areas that you're kind of missing, or it's even too much at the point. Yeah. So I did appreciate that. Now let's go back. We've been talking about developmental editing. And I know before you began mine, you asked me to have a document about my intention for the book. So I created a document, and it included like the target audience, the book title, subtitle, which you finally helped me come up with. So I actually give you credit for coming up with the subtitle. Like the book title, I was definitely certain on from the beginning, but for the book subtitle, it was like all over the place. And then we talked about themes, and then the color and cover of the book. Why would you say those things are important to have before starting the developmental editing process?
That's a wonderful question. And I love that you mentioned all the things that were in that document, because with your book in particular, I went into a lot of detail, and I'm happy that you were receptive to my artistic feedback. Because not all editors, as I've found, are necessarily there to give you like creative feedback or like really fill that in. But because I'm an artist, because I'm just like that, I'm very visual, and I've seen a lot of books. I've been a self-help junkie since I was 12 years old. Like, I just had a vision. So to answer your question, the reason why all of that is important is because there's this stage that in traditional publishing called research and development that you need to do to see if your book is viable. Because if you are putting or if you're paying for everything when you're doing your own book, like it can add up, because a traditional publisher will do all of that. They do everything, you send off your book, but it's, obviously it's harder to do that. So if you're doing indie, like you're paying for everything, you want to make sure, first of all, even if you're not thinking about money, that it's going to reach, your message is going to reach the people that you need it to reach. So you have to do a little bit of research, whether that's with SEO or just asking people or just observing a community, maybe that there's like a gap in some knowledge or something like that. And your book was a creative take. It was like very personalized, but at the same time, like I know it's things that people relate to, and it had connections. And I tried to emphasize those connections because you want to really go into what makes your book unique. And also going off of that, it being unique, you want it to really resonate with a very, very specific audience. So when we started working together, I know you had, just like a lot of authors do, like a more broad age range, right? Yeah. And that's what a lot of authors do, is because it's more like idealism, right? And I'm a dreamer, and I'm all for idealism. I have like all these ideas and stuff like that. But when it comes to marketing is essentially research. Marketing isn't, people think it means advertising, but it actually means like, what's the market? Who would buy this? Who has bought this? Blah, blah, blah. So you want to think like a salesperson before you even do it, or like a marketer, because it has to resonate with that person where they're like, oh, this book is for me. This book was made for me. And I know we've all had those experiences, you know, where it's like, oh my God, I love this book. Like it knows me somehow. And the reason why it's like that is because it's very specific. Right. If you're too broad, it doesn't really, it won't really hit anybody, because it's not really focused. And also it matters because when you finally put it on Amazon, like you have to align it with the right type of genre and subgenres. You know, there's genres within genres within genres. Goodness. I'm still learning about all that.
Yeah. Categories and then the keywords.
Yeah. So it has to do with that, and also just like the content of the book, because like it's not like any product. Like it's like, okay, you make a product, let's say you're selling like a lipstick, like that's like a one thing, it stays the same, people use it, it has one purpose, whatever, it resonates with a certain market, right? But a book is something so interactive, like you have to really be kind of reading the reader's mind the whole time. So you got to have all these details worked out. And I know together we worked on the structure, like how it would look. And I'm very like type A with how I like everything to be very aligned from the start. I like to have all these kind of cohesive elements across. Like we had like your scriptures at the beginning, and then we had a little reflection section at the end. Like all these things should be in place so we know exactly the kind of book we're doing, and then we can go in that direction. Because once I know what we're doing, then I'll go into a cave and I will make it happen. And then the proofreading is like making sure that there are no errors in the process that we chose, you know. And what's really great about, like, you know, you got to have a writing coach and a book coach, people like on your team doing that, is that then their job is to make sure that that gets to the right people, like literally, like, you know, on Amazon and all that.
I do have a question about self-publishing versus traditional publishing.
Okay.
Can you talk about the difference? Because what I did was self-publishing.
Right. Yeah. So basically, I recently heard it described, because I personally know more about self-publishing than traditional publishing. But basically, to choose what route you want to go is basically, if you don't have the money to do this whole endeavor, hiring editors, you know, sometimes you need like a beta reader, like all these things that you need, then you might want to go traditional. It's kind of like, the way I see it is, it's kind of similar to like, okay, do you want to sign a deal with a record label, or do you want to go indie? It's very similar. Someone is believing in you. They know they can make money off of you. There's royalties involved, and they do all the costs, the cover, everything. When you're self-publishing, you don't have to wait. You don't have to try to appeal to a bunch of people. Especially as a first-time author, it can be difficult to get in with the traditional publishers, because they don't know you. You might not have a following. You might not be a strong writer, and that's okay. You know, that's where editing comes in. I think writing is a weird kind of gray area of things, because someone can be a good, effective writer, but they might not be like super like artistic with all of their words all the time. So there's just so many, like, again, there's just so many like gray areas that I think that with self-publishing, you just have like a lot more control over lots of stuff, and you can just make it happen. And you can certainly disperse your costs. Like, you don't have to just like, you know, do it all at once. But yeah, that's basically the difference. And I'm personally more familiar with the self-publishing aspect of it, where it's like, well, we might take a first-time author and make them into a published author, as opposed to like, you know, being like a book coach training someone to like how to get in with a traditional publisher, which is where you do like a little proposal, you do like a short little kind of sample of your work, and you send it to them, similar to an audition, the way that I think of that, because my background is performance, you know. Yeah, it's kind of like an audition.
Yeah, I can see the pro and cons to both. I think as a self-published author, the goal is to definitely become like a traditional, like do the traditional publishing, even if it's once. Definitely might not come after one book, obviously, but it's a good thing, I think, when someone else just like does all of that.
Yeah,
to really pay, because this was a very costly process.
Yeah,
but it was good. It was worth it in the end. It is worth it in the end, but it was a very costly process.
Yeah.
You've been mentioning indie. Is that also like a traditional editing, or like, I don't know what that is?
Can you... Indie meaning self-publishing as in independent. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Similar to the music. I keep referencing indie, music, but it's very similar.
That's what I was like, indie. Okay. I like that word. I like
that. Okay. It's funny because with music, it came to mean a certain aesthetic, but indie just means not part of a record label. And that, to me, is the best path, because nowadays you can create a community on your own. You just have to do the work and be educated on like marketing and things like that. So it's like you have more control and more freedom, and you can become a better writer as you go along. And then, like you said, like why not just send a proposal to like a publisher and see if, you know, by the time you feel that you're ready, and maybe you have something that they want, then you could do that for sure. But I think definitely in today's day and age, even though it's hard and it challenges you and you don't have validation from some big publisher, like you have to validate yourself, it's more like it's like a lonely path, because you have to, like, you know, you might not have family members or people around you that are supportive or even understand, you know, what you're doing, why you're doing it. But it's like, you know, it's for you, and also like that's why it's worth it. Like, again, with the developmental editing, it's like you want to also make sure like it's actually going to reach people, and then that hopefully you're going to break even, and then hopefully that you'll make a profit, you know, from that.
Yeah, but I actually just want to say, anyone that is thinking of, well, because I went through self-publishing school, so I got a coach. You know, I had like all these courses online that helped me walk through. And that's why I'm really excited. I have 2 others within the next 2 weeks coming up to talk about how they also publish their books. And I'm very interested to know the different ways they publish their book, because the school I went through was costly. But I'm actually supposed to do a video highlighting the difference, and in the in the book they gave me, they showed the difference between going through them or doing it by yourself. And doing it by yourself would cost like more for like the formatting, cover design, all that stuff. They did it for me. I did not have to do any of that. I just had to write my book. The only thing I had to pay for outside of the self-publishing school was professional editing.
Right.
The rest, they handled everything, but that was $6,000. which, depending on the person's, is subjective. That amount might be either too much or just fine for some people. So I know there are other different schools and other like organizations that do help people walk through that. But I think for my next book, because I already have all the information they gave me, my next book, I'm not going to go through them anymore. I will do it by myself. Definitely have you as professional editor because that was very helpful. And then I would have to look for someone to help me with cover design and formatting, because those are the two like most important things after the book is done. But other than that, yeah, and I don't think it's gonna cost up to $6,000. I think it was just mainly also the first time. But I'm really interested to hear what the other ladies, how their book publishing process was. I do have, I think, just one more question.
Sure.
If somebody wants to approach you to help edit their book, what are the things they need to have in place first that would make it easier?
So that's actually an interesting question because I'm relatively young in my journey of editing. So I've seen a lot of several different, as I like to say as a euphemism, colorful ways that authors present their books to me. Some people haven't edited their book, haven't looked at it at all. Some people are very prepared, have already had beta readers and just really done all the research. Some people are high tech, some people are low tech, some people are like have like a bunch of questions about like the legal aspect of mentioning people's names. Like some people like are very hands off. So it's like there's just so many different types of clients and so many different types of understanding about what it means to have like a manuscript prepared that I've done a lot of things to just accommodate the first time writer, but I don't necessarily think that all of it was easy for me to do, if that makes sense. Because for example, if you're kind of a low-tech person and you want to write a book but you don't know how to use Google Drive, you don't know how to use Microsoft Word, that does make it harder. Not just because it's more on your editor if they agree to that, because not every editor will. Like some editors, they've been in the game like longer and they're just like, they have their rules. They have only certain people that they'll work with. But because I found myself in the niche of first-time authors, especially of self-help and these teaching memoirs, which is kind of like yours, you have some anecdotes and things, but you're also teaching lessons to people. It's like I've learned like the way that people do things, and I always this is, I guess, a more personal. I personally appreciate when people are more organized. They know how to use the software. They know what they want, and all these things. But I am there to provide support. So in any way that I can, I'll provide support. But if you haven't even read your book, and if you don't know a lot about the technology, that does make it harder. So I would suggest that you kind of get up to speed on how to, you at least know what you wrote. You go through it because, if you have any surprises, it's kind of like the book's not really ready yet. It's kind of like with makeup, when you go to like do like a photo shoot or something, they want you to have your skin moisturized before they do like, they do your makeup and stuff. Like things have to be prepped, like preheating the oven. It's like you kind of want to make sure at least at the bare level, like you've looked at it, you've edited it yourself, or at least just been aware of what's in it. And then if you don't know a lot about technology, it's really not as intimidating as people make it out to be, especially if you are like, I don't know, people around age like in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they kind of, and I don't mean this offensively at all. I'm saying this on purpose. Like, I would just want everyone to know I love them. But it's like, there's a resistance to learning technology. But it's not, it doesn't mean you have to be like super high tech. It's literally just like, do you know how to answer comments in Microsoft Word? And that will make it easier, because doing everything on the phone, again, colorful. Yeah. I've been through some situations where I didn't really realize, because also some authors will exclude that information. And I don't realize until later. And I'm just like really nice. I'm just being honest here. I don't think it's like an ideal situation as I become more experienced. And I know obviously that I do my job well, and, you know, and I respect the craft and things like that. If I'm only chasing you around on the phone, we're talking about things on the phone, it really doesn't help it move along. And it's like the book is just not as far along as it could be, because it's like the editing process does require us to go back and forth. Because if you give it to me and I edited it, and I edit it, then I'm just doing like what's based off of my impression of it. But I want to know that you're happy as a client, and that I'm not like, you know, excluding something major or adding something that's going to confuse something. Like, I'm a human being. Like, I'm just trying to do what the job is, but also complimenting you as an author. You know what I mean? I don't want to get in the way, but also miss things, you know. So it's an interesting process. Again, it's not black and white. It's like the communication style, all the different ways that we do things is very, very interesting.
Definitely have your book read first. Have your rough. So even in this part of writing this book, I have a YouTube series, Becoming an Author. And one of the videos we talk about self-editing. You have to self-edit your work first before you present it to the professional editor, because already that process, that back and forth takes a long time.
Exactly.
The first time I reached out to you was in March. I don't think we started editing until maybe April, May. And we finished June, about that. So it took a long time. It actually went past the time that we stipulated. Like, we said it was going to be 8 to 10 weeks, if I can remember, but no, that was longer. So it's just best to self-edit, read your work. I'm of the opinion, well, I'm not of the opinion, but I learned in the self-publishing school that you do not edit as you write, because that takes time. And that's what I was doing. So it's very good. Like, definitely go check out the series. We talk about just mind mapping first, and then structure, kind of creating your chapters, or your sections. I know I had 3 sections initially, and we're like move it into 2 sections, and it worked so well. 2 sections, 7 chapters. And that was great. So it's all about, like, the book was just self-edits first. Use Grammarly, do whatever you whatever software you want to use before presenting it to your professional editor. Now, if someone was to go on Fiverr or any of these platforms to look for a professional editor, what are the things they should be looking out for, and what are the things they should be asking? Because I know when I sent you the email, I was like, okay, are you able to do this within this time, even if we didn't? And that was mainly on my part, because you finished the editing, you gave it to me, I just took long to get back. So we also have to, like, incorporate that time, because life happens and you never know what's, like, I might need an extra week before getting this back to you. Well, we talked about that contract, the time, how you pay, and and also some of your works. You also shared some of the Christian books that you've edited, because that was also important. Like, I'm writing a Christian book. I cannot have an author that has, like, really basically has no idea and has never edited a Christian book. So those little things Can you like share more about things that people, new authors or people writing books need to be aware of when looking for, searching, or selecting a professional editor?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, before you kind of look for like, I think, like you said, like the expectation is really important to frame before you even do that. Not frame, but like the expectation is good to adjust before you look for an editor. So it's good for anyone who's maybe thinking about doing this process, is to realize that maybe some things are going to take longer than you thought, because you're kind of going off of like, oh, I'm excited to be an author. You know, I'm like, oh, I want to be this. I want to be like published by this day. And I know that like with the self-publishing school, they do that as a way to motivate you and get you to do it, because you're likely the person that's been thinking about writing this book for like 30 years and you never did it, you know? So it's a way to get you to do it, but it's not, as anyone knows, things in real life take longer. We had a contract for when we start the work and when the deadline is, but there's that time in between where you need to like I said before, we need to make sure that like I understood things correctly, that you're happy with this. Did we, you know, so there's kind of like this little bit of a revision process in between that's dependent on the author's schedule around that time. So I always say that up front in my emails because it's like, you know, I'll do my job, I'll do it by the deadline. But it's like, you know, our collaboration is really a huge part of it. You know, I can't just like make magic happen.
Right.
I mean, editing is magic, but it's like, it's a collaboration. So yeah, so when you are going to look for an editor, it's important, like you know, you asked for like my works that were similar. I think that was a really good thing to do, because you want to just make sure that I was informed about the process. And Christian books, I don't know if everybody knows this, but they have their own style guide too. Mm-hmm. Based on the Chicago Manual of Style. There's like just so many specific things to Christian books that I'm familiar with because of my experience. Like before that, I wouldn't have known this, although I did grow up Catholic, and I'm familiar with Christianity in general. But editing books, it's like, it's very different from like being a Christian, or even just knowing that like, okay, well, we capitalize he or whatever it is, you know, there's just a certain way. And I just happened to study the Bible like in a couple classes in college too. So yeah, it's just, that's just one thing that I was familiar with. So you knew that because of the list that I sent you and the types of books that I did. So that's good to do, to just kind of ask. And also don't be alarmed if some people charge for a sample, because the thing is that editors, which a sample is usually like maybe like 5 pages, maybe 10, just to see if you like the style of the editor. And people charge because sometimes people go around trying to get free samples from a bunch of people, and then they just do this weird unethical thing where they're just trying to get like free editing, which is weird anyway, because it's like you're getting editing from a bunch of different people and it doesn't work. But yeah, and then you'll have to pay a deposit because the editor is setting aside a time in their schedule for you. So that might be anywhere from like 20% to 50%, you know, things like that. And you just want to make sure, and it's funny because it's something I'm really self-conscious of, because I'm also a proofreader, is, you know, in their communications with you, do they have typos? Do they have all these things? You know, you just want to make sure that this person is really who they say they are. You know, look at their website. You know, not with mistrusting eyes, because I think also you don't want to like put that energy out there.
Right.
You know, you don't want to start off like that, but you definitely want to take your time and just kind of see if this person resonates with you based on, like we said, like the books that they've done, their personality, their style. So yeah, and you mentioned Fiverr, and the thing is, there's this kind of, I guess I'm going to use the word toxic idea that I don't know if anyone has searched on YouTube. If you look for information on proofreading, because say, like the word proofreading specifically, because people will use the word, as we discussed at the beginning, people will use the word proofreading to mean editing. So let's say you're looking at proofreading thinking like, okay, that's editing or whatever. There's a lot of information on YouTube that doesn't tell you how to proofread, but it tells you you can make so much money on Fiverr with no experience by becoming a proofreader.
Right.
And you've seen that, right? And people think that like, and people overseas, you know, that maybe like their English isn't the best. They believe that they can do this because what they think proofreading is, because it has the word reading in it, they think that you're just reading something. But when I went to school for proofreading, I realized I was like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff you don't see. The brain does this like Grammarly thing. It does this autocorrect thing, and you won't see the in a line next to each other. Or you won't see that you misspelled like the most basic word ever. Like, you know, it's just like the brain is really interesting because it like, it puts information in the background that you don't think is important at the time. And then it puts certain things to the foreground. So like, that's really dangerous when you're looking at a book. So especially someone who has no experience and maybe doesn't even know the language very well, they're over here thinking that they can be a proofreader just because they can read. That's not the same thing. A proofreading is a very technical skill. It's very specific. So I would say watch out for that, you know, and editors are people that when they call themselves editors, they're people that are, you know, they are concerned with grammar. They've probably been to university. Maybe they didn't go to school for that specific thing, because I don't think that they always teach you how to edit when you get an English degree. I think that happens more like learning on the job. I've learned that like, you know, when you go to school, like, yeah, you might analyze literature and stuff, but does that prepare you for dealing with clients? You know, them expecting you to chase them on the phone, and, you know, all the things that I kind of said before. So yeah, it's just kind of like being aware of what's going on. Like, are there people thinking that they're proofreaders and they're not? Do people charge for this? Finding out, how do I prepare my manuscript? Because you want to be prepared, but you also want to make sure that that person's legit. So it's kind of like both, you know, because the editor's also kind of scoping you out. They're making sure that you're not trying to scam them, and you're making sure they're not trying to scam you. And it's not always about scamming, but it's also about like vibe. Like, do I like you? Do I trust you with my stuff? You know, with the self-teaching memoirs, it's like there's a lot of like private, not private, but like intimate things sometimes that you say in books, and it's like you want to make sure that's trusted to the right person.
Right. Right. And it is very, because I know some people that just like decided to open a Fiverr account and start selling services, obviously, without like degree, or not even only a degree, but training or proper training about that subject. So it's very important. What other websites, I don't know, would you say it's good to find a professional editor or proofreader? Or is Fiverr also a good one, but you just have to be careful, like just go through it?
Yeah.
So
there are legitimate people on there, but you probably find a large volume of people that they're just trying to do like anything. They're like, I'll edit your videos and I'll do this and I'll do that. And that's one thing sometimes I get insecure about, because I'm like, I have so many interests, and I have things on the internet about my my past career. Well, it's current, because I'm always a musician, you know, I'm always an artist. Just like Heather, she came on, we were bonding because she's also an artist. And what ties her editing, writing, and art is that she loves fiction and science fiction. For me, I'm a writer, I'm a painter, and I'm a singer, and what ties them together is my love of fantasy. So I'm like, I don't want to appear like I'm in too many places, like that I'm not focused on editing, that I'm not like this person that's gonna serve you, you know. And I have to be careful to not get too much into like the personal side or the artistic side or the like many interest side, because I want to show my clients that I am present with them and that I am serious with this career and this is like what it is. So I think, yeah, if like it's someone that's doing too many things, they can do anything. I don't think that that is necessarily good. You want someone that's like, they're an editor, like they love doing that,
Right.
you know what I mean? So yeah.
How can someone become an editor or proofreader?
What I did was I went to Proofread Anywhere, which is a really good school. I think the name sounds like kind of like it's not serious because, well, the reason why the name is like that is because their whole hook, their like selling point is that you can have a career, and this was way before COVID. They opened up in 2015.
Okay.
And it's really creepy because I could have sworn I saw it like before 2015 and I wanted to do it for a long time. But in 2015, Proofread Anywhere opened, and Caitlin Pyle is the one who opened up the school. And her thing is like, you can work from home. You can work from anywhere. And they have pictures of people like proofreading and like exotic spots and things, because it's like the whole thing is like you can, you know, you have freedom. So that's why it's called Proofread Anywhere. And I was working on that as I was transitioning out of music teaching because I was a little bit burnt out, to be honest with everyone. I was really burnt out. I was teaching too much and performing too much, and it was just like a lot, and I needed to rest. So I was like, I wanted to work from home. And then so I went to Proofread Anywhere, and I would suggest to people to do that because it's wonderful and it connects you to the authors from SPS. So when you're done with the school, they put you in a directory and they say like, oh, we approve of this person. So that's how I gained my experience. And I actually never left because I love it. I love the SPS authors. Yeah. And then, like I said, like that led me to become an editor. And the way I would suggest people become editors is to take classes from the Editorial Freelance Association, because the EFA, so you can go to efa.org, and they have very specific courses on the different types of editing, and also basic stuff. They have anywhere from grammar to like developmental editing with fiction specifically, or what is line editing, like just line editing. And they just have like all these professionals. They have what people should be paid in the profession. It's like the most like legit, in my opinion, the most legit resource of information for this ever-changing gray area weird profession we have. So yeah, I would say EFA is a great resource. And then Proofread Anywhere is just a great school if someone wants to become a proofreader. And I think it's worth it to go through proofreading school because you have to train your brain to see the errors, you know. I mean, I guess you can do it without. I'm sure there are examples of people that have done it. Maybe some people grew up doing this stuff. I don't know. But yeah, for me, I just wanted to train myself professionally because even though English teaching, just in my life, English teaching and Spanish teaching, like that was my parents, English teacher, Spanish teacher together. Education was always a thing in my life, and I was always good at writing. I was always translating for everybody. I was like the person who knew English in the family, you know? So, I mean, that's innate to me, but again, like I want to present my best, most professional self to my clients. I don't want them to be like, oh, well, you were in a punk band and now you're like doing this. Like, how did you even, you know, it has to like make sense. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's my recommendation because that's what I did. There's probably a bunch of other ways to do it, but I don't think that a university is necessarily the way because that has a different focus.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sandi. Before we go, can you just tell people where they can reach you? I know you have a YouTube and also your Instagram. Please let us know.
Yes, I have a YouTube. It's just Proofreader Sandi. I have a few videos there. If you have any specific questions, you can leave a comment and I'll make a video about it. I have my Instagram here at Proofreader Sandi. And that's pretty much my most active social medias because I don't really like Facebook.
Same. I have it, but I'm hardly on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like growing up, again, I've mentioned that I'm 31 like a million times just because I'm like happy, I guess. I'm like, yay, I'm 31. That like I feel like it's like everyone's moms is on there, and that's like who it is. It's like just moms sharing pictures of their babies, and I don't relate to that, so I'm like, I don't know if I should be on here. But yeah, if you want to reach me, Instagram, YouTube, yeah, and you can email me, proofreadersandi@gmail.com. I also have another email, weird call, Sandi@proofreadersandi.com, whichever one works. Happy to answer any questions and just guide you in your process if you're doing self-publishing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandi. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You again on video. I know we did that like twice while we're editing, but it's nice to see you.
Thank you. This was awesome. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with everything with your book, and it looks beautiful, and I'm so happy that I got to work on it with you.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll be working together shortly. Trust me. I've been working. So
awesome. Awesome. I'll be looking forward to it. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.